The Gates of Cusimano.
To explore glaring omissions in the tests fired for the commission, CBS News decided to conduct its own tests with the Mannlicher Carcano.
A moving target is harder to hit than a stationary one, and the elevation of the sixth floor window might make a difference. The only elevation for the Warren Commission firing tests was a 30-foot tower, less than half the height of the book depository's sixth floor above Elm Street. So CBS News had a tower and target track constructed to match exactly the heights and distances in Dealey Plaza. The target track was angled to match precisely the angle of Elm Street. The target, a standard FBI silhouette, moved by electric motor at 11 miles an hour, approximately the speed of the presidential limousine. A rifle of the same make and age as Oswald's was fitted with the same 4-power telescopic sight found on his rifle. 11 volunteer marksmen took turns, firing clips of 3 bullets each at the moving target. None of the men had much familiarity with the Italian Mannlicher Carcano, although each was given time to practice at a nearby indoor range, and most of the volunteers were experienced with bolt-action rifles. In each case, the first shot was fired at a point approximating the point at which the Warren Commission deduced the first shot was fired. Distance, about 175 feet. In 6 seconds, the distance grows to 270 feet. Results varied. A Maryland state trooper made 2 hits in the silhouette. 1 near miss in slightly less than 5 seconds. Another state trooper's best time was 5.4 seconds. One hit, 2 near misses. A weapons engineer had the best score. 3 hits in 5.2 seconds.
Gift that keeps on giving. We have combined the forces of the Trabuccos and the Cusimanos. We are an Italian orgy tonight.
That sounded like a crime family thing. The Trabuccos.
This is the Trabucco Cusimano family. And this was never supposed to happen in the history of the world, and now all hell has been unleashed.
Yeah, let's talk about how we got here. We did a JFK episode. Joe, you were very upset that you were not invited to the JFK episode.
I just saw the title of the episode, and I'm like, this motherfucker.
See, I didn't know. I can't believe this. I didn't know. So go ahead. Let's talk about the movie for a little bit. I didn't know this is one of your all-time favorite movies. I had no idea.
Yeah, I did. I if that movie is on, I will watch it from beginning to end, all 3 hours, morning, noon, night, doesn't matter. It's a really well done movie. The actors, and I'm going to get right, except for Kevin Costner. Everybody is great.
Well, yeah. Oh, no, I thought for a second he was about to say Kevin Bacon. I was like, you hold up. Kevin Bacon is on fire in this movie.
We're going to get to Kevin Bacon here in very shortly. Let me just tell you.
Oh, yes.
But so with the movie, I was like everybody else. So I would have been, it came out in 90, 91?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So at that point, I'm 16, and I'm right at that point. I already was starting to kind of dabble in a little bit more conspiracy theory. Although I would say we were into the Kennedy thing since we were little.
Yeah.
And anytime there was stuff on, so I was ripe when this movie came out. And I was like, everybody, point for point, absolutely. There's no way he put this up there unless it's somewhat true. And I think it was on Oprah or something one time too, and said, take creative license, but this is how I think the assassination went down. And I was like, you really didn't answer the question. But he did come back and say that everything in the movie is true. As the years went on, I started kind of looking into it. And I just saw most of what's there is distorted, not by even Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone, I think, is he has a David St. Hubbard's thing, probably believes everything he reads. And I think he probably thought Garrison was a completely legitimate prosecutor and a really moral, upstanding guy. And he did not know what a shithead that he is.
Okay, now
That's at the end of
first
the
let's jump into the okay, look.
Yes.
No, so tell me about Garrison. Why? I don't know really much about him. Just when I think of Garrison, I think of Kevin Costner. So who is Garrison? Why is he an ass?
So with Garrison now, from what I understand, he's a genuine love of Kennedy. He had a genuine love of Kennedy. Like he was Vito. By the way, my favorite part of that episode you guys did was like Vito just wanted to answer like, so what do you give a fuck? And I'm like,
that was my issue the whole time. It's like, why does he care? It bugged me whenever they talked about it in the news. They're like the assassination of John Kennedy, and he's like, damn it, he's all mad. And I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, he's so hurt. He's like,
generation.
God, I'm ashamed to be an American. And the reality is, like, the guys in the bar are like us. We'd be like, die. Don't you know what he did to this country?
He deserves a medal. That shit was funny.
He should give him a medal.
Okay, go back. We're gonna keep doing.
So with him, like he's really big. And Grant, so a lot of my knowledge does come through Wikipedia and podcasts. So I'm not exactly a historian, but for the most part, this is verifiable stuff. So he, of course, started looking into, well, who killed Kennedy? And he starts really putting together, it's like somebody who's like, well, that seems like it fits, and that seems like it fits. So what he really thought, what you had was a cabal of homosexuals that were out to kill the president, and he never really, and then all the other stuff he was able to use as proof that this band of homosexuals, as you put it time and time again in the movie, that is who killed Kennedy. That was his initial.
Those goddamn fucking homosexuals killed Kennedy.
Yeah. And everything else that comes in with it, you get it's almost like, okay, that's my theory, and now I'm going to find everything that makes sense. And like, I will give you kind of one of the first, we'll get to Donald Sutherland in a second, but like one of the really kind of first lies that everybody was able to say, well, this isn't even true, is Joe Pesci's character when he was quote unquote confessing,
Oh, okay.
And then the very next scene, you see him getting murdered and everything too. Well, now when they said that the coroner ruled it, well, this guy died of natural causes, and he had actually never been interviewed by Garrison ever. Anytime he was interviewed by anyone, he's like, I had nothing to do with it. So the coroner said that, oh, this guy died of natural causes. No one murdered him. And there was only one person could have challenged that death. And the one person was Jim Garrison. He could have come in and said, no, I want this reinvestigated. But he didn't do anything. That is kind of the first really big kind of glaring thing in JFK, is that you kind of needed that. Now, Barry and Oswald, that is true. They were in the Army Air Corps together. That is not alike. And a lot of people were, that is still one of those, if that's a coincidence, it's a huge coincidence, but the reality is that sometimes that shit happens.
Right.
Can you imagine that power where Garrison, he goes in, there's a bullet hole in the head of David Ferry and he's got a gun in his hand. He's like, no, it wasn't suicide. Coroner's like, no, this was suicide. I'm sorry, but no. This was like, that's the equivalent of that when he's going in and the coroner is telling him, the doctors are telling him, no, this guy died of natural causes. No, it wasn't natural causes. A gay man killed him. A gay man killed this gay man.
Do I have to talk to you about these homosexuals? I'm
just hearing Oliver Stone's voice as he's like writing the script, saying all this stuff to himself.
He's like, "It's a fucking banger, man."
So let's go back to let's so the Joe Pesci character David Ferry never got interviewed by Garrison.
No.
Okay.
He was never interviewed by him. And anytime he was ever asked about this, again, he could have been lying, could have been total bullshit, could have been, could have never said a word, but he knew a lot of stuff, but he never once started freaking out and saying that I did this, or like, oh yeah, I need somebody to protect me. Never went down that road with it.
That bums me out because I love that scene when they have Ferry in there and they're talking to him and he's like, and Kevin Costner's so smooth. He's like, So, what'd you catch? And he's like, nothing. There were all the boys told us you didn't catch a thing. The boys told us you didn't catch a thing. Oh, sorry, Mr. Garrison, because you know what? I just remembered. I forgot. We got out there and there was no gate. See, I loved that scene, and it seems so real. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, that's how they caught him in this thing. And if all of that is a lie, I'm like, what the fuck? How did Oliver Stone come up with that?
So I want to save that one for last, because I read that actually today of what a lot of this is based on. And when I read this today, it really was like kind of one of those moments when you're by yourself, you're reading something on the computer and you laugh out loud without being prompted to. That's what I did when I saw, oh my God, this is how this movie took the fuck off. So I want to skip. I don't want to get into that one yet. And by the way, there are so many more than what I'm going to go into, but these are the ones based off of when you guys were talking about the movie. I'm like, okay, these are the things these guys are going to really be like, well, said to yourself, what the fuck?
Look, I've already told Vito there's two things, and we'll wait till you get to them. But if you tell me they're bullshit, I'm killing myself tonight.
Okay, give me your two. Give me your two.
Well, one is, Clay Shaw, Clay Burcham. You mean Clay Burcham's Clay
Bertram?
Clay Burcham's Clay Shaw. He runner of the international trademark. If that dude is not involved, that guy. It's not that he. Here's the thing. I don't even care necessarily if he's not involved, but he better have had those parties. He better have been dressed up in gold. He better have been painted gold.
Okay, so one, Clay Shaw is a real guy. He was put on trial. Really had his name dragged through the mud. Was a wealthy industrialist. I don't know if I'd say he was Kevin Spacey in the Savannah movie, but
no, he was
that kind of guy. And
what do you mean? What do you mean?
Like he was a known, he was a confirmed bachelor. Everybody knew he was gay. And
he was. What do they say in the movie? He's like he's a Butch John. He's a Butch John.
No, it's the whole thing with him, having those getting dressed up as dandy fops.
God, that's the best.
They go, that was probably a Garrison invention of, I need to show that these guys just weren't gay, but they were very gay.
They were like, oh my God, that breaks my heart. That's like the best.
But he was a real guy. He was apparently, very, very cocky like that too, that felt he was untouchable, that type of guy.
Did he, let me ask you, did he really have tie-ins with the CIA though? Or is that bullshit?
That's one of those things. Their CIA won't confirm or deny. I would say a guy in his position, probably, if not, I wouldn't say he's somebody outright working for the FBI, but he is, or CIA, but somebody that he has a very close working relationship with them. That's probably, but I would say that about almost any wealthy, I think he was in shipping and so forth. All those guys are tied into everything. So I would imagine he was in some way connected to the CIA.
Okay. All right.
Vince, what's your other thing
that's a guess though?
Okay. Vince, what's the other thing that you can't have?
So that's we're kind of, at least there's a possibility, even though it kind of seems like
there's a possibility of a Roman orgy. Yes.
Yeah. Possibility of a Roman orgy. Gotta be a Roman orgy in that. And the other thing would be I guess it would have to be, so with Oswald, so he was like, he for sure was like all the information that's out there about him being in the Russian, he got the Russian apartment with the wife, and he got the the training or whatever. All that's true, right?
Yeah.
He did. Yeah. Okay.
The training. As far as being in the Marines, all that and working as a sharpshooter, all that. The one thing that's inaccurate in the movie is that he was a poor shot. They said Oswald could hit a bullseye from, I think, 300 yards away. And if you that's 3 football fields.
Yeah, that's
and he can nail a bull. That's a sharpshooter. They said as a Marine, I don't know how they grade out, but he wasn't the top end, but he was very he was. They go, even an average sharpshooter is the best shot you would ever meet. So that was
Okay.
That was the one thing about Oswald. But as far as he did go, well, okay. So now the guy's name, the guy who wrote a book is called Case Closed. Funny enough, Gerald Posner. He's the one who really
I've heard
is
of
kind
this,
of the
yeah.
He's the foremost JFK guy. You hear. I don't know if this was in his book or another guy's book, but if you ever like really hear about the childhood of Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald. He was the guy that always would walk around. You never talk to this guy in your life, but every now and again you see him. He sits there and tells you about all the crazy shit that he does, and then he walks away. Because you just want you to think he's, he doesn't give a shit. That was Lee Harvey Oswald, his entire upbringing. He threw a cleaver at his brother when his brother pissed him off one time too. Complete psychopath. Okay. And he was just like, they said he used to catch fish, and people were like, yeah, it's great, Lee. And then he just started letting him die on the ground because he wanted to show everybody. And then, how crazy he could be. So Lee Harvey Oswald, when you look at him from through that perspective and the people you knew that were like that, and then you find out that this guy, when he got out of the Marines, he wanted to renounce his citizenship because he wanted to be a Marine that renounced his citizenship and moved to Russia because he thought he was going to be an international superstar after that. He thought everybody was going to want to interview him, want to talk to him. And we know this because they have his diary. So he really thought he was going to be a big deal. And when he got to Russia, the KGB initially did interview him. They're like, let's see what this motherfucker can do. And they talked to him. And the only thing he had done that was of note was that when he was in Japan, he did work, I think, on the stealth bomber, or whatever that was, not the stealth bomber.
That mystery plane.
So he worked on, and they were like, he's like, I know all the codes, and he was giving them all the codes, and even the Russians at the time were like, yeah, they change this all the time. They don't keep you the same code forever. They know eventually they're going to keep it going. So they didn't say this to Oswald, but they're like, okay, this guy could do nothing for us. So let's just make sure. Anytime when he moved there, he thought he was going to become an economist. He thought he was going to be this man. He thought he was going to be the guy with the pipe and the jacket on, but he ended up just being a guy who worked at a factory. And he did have apparently a big group of friends, and they said more than likely all of his friends were KGB that kept an eye on him. And he met Marina through these friends, and Marina was she just wanted to get the fuck out of the Soviet Union. And I mean, who couldn't blame her?
Right.
All she thought was, I'm going to get this is an American he's treating me well. I mean, they got married really quickly, and so that's when they came back. And he thought when he got back, he thought there was going to be he thought he was going to be Frank Drebin in the first Naked Gun when he gets off the plane and Weird Al Yankovic's away. He thought he was going to have it. He got off the plane, and I think it was his brother who picked him up, and he's like, "Where is everybody?" And his brother's like, "Who?" He's like, "The press. Where's the press?" So that's who he was.
Okay,
he was somebody that was needy as fuck, just wanted attention, and also was a trained killer because he could be a sharpshooter from 300 yards away. And he beat the shit out of Marina. He was a piece of shit, but everybody tried that's the thing in JFK, they try to paint him as this family man, but most people that knew her and knew him, they were like, we got to get her out of that. But she didn't want to get divorced because she didn't want to go back to the Soviet Union. But at the same time though, and everybody tried to blame her, but the day of or the night before when he shot Kennedy, he had called and asked if he could come home. And she said, I love you, but I can't have you here. And who could blame her? I mean, she was getting the shit kicked out of her the entire relationship. And she just finally said, I can't do it. So there were people that came out and said that the president would be alive if you would have just taken him back.
Whoa.
So anyway,
all for a woman. All for a fucking woman. Jesus.
So long story short is the big thing was, first off, Kennedy was not his first assassination attempt. He tried killing General Edwin Walker, who was a right-wing fascist.
Now this,
yes.
now
go ahead. Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
we can talk about it. Let's get into
it. So I think I have heard something that there was something that he had tried to do before, but I thought in the movie that they were, I mean, and I could be just because that movie's so fast paced that maybe I'm getting things confused, but I thought in the movie they were saying like that was sort of that the other Oswalds, the mysterious Oswalds that were everywhere. I thought that had something to do with that. Like maybe that the mysterious Oswalds that were popping up in different countries, that was part of that.
So that you get the two, the multiple Oswalds. The reason I think this is the real one, and I mean, but you're right. I mean, I could be completely off base. Like, there's some conspiracy theorists out there going, they got him hook, line, and sinker. But
Yeah.
But I guess the way I look at it as that he was there in Dallas. He had started working there. He was back living with his wife. I'll give you the podcast to listen to too, because they talked about Marina had it like when they interrogated her too. She said one of the things that Oswald used to do is just run and jump on the couch. He'd run through the house and jump up onto the couch because he thought it was important that he was good at leaping when he became an assassin. so anyway, but he.
Oh my God! I feel like I know these people.
That's what I'm saying. I kind of when I heard all this about him, I'm like, okay, I get it now. But anyway, he had in his diary, he had like a list of people that he wanted to kill. Edwin Walker was one of them. And I told, I'm saving that to the end.
Yeah, save that. We'll get into the actual, let's talk about the movie some more. And then we'll get into the actual assassination. So hang on to all the Oswald stuff and everything. Let's go more into the movie and the facts and everything like that.
See, I told you it's so hard. To stay on task.
I know.
Okay, so let me go into the two things that were really glaring missteps in the movie too, that anybody that knew the backstory, which I will say there's a lot of people who know this, that they'll probably point out that I've got stuff wrong. But the first one that's not as big of a bombshell is Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon's name in the movie is Willie O'Keefe, and the real guy's name is Perry Russo. And the testimony that Kevin Bacon gives us very straight, I don't know if we can call all that a straightforward tale, but all the drugs, sex, and all the shit.
Well, Mary, you're mine, Mary.
And they point out too, like how Willie made a pass. You're my time, Mr. Garrison. You and I could have a good time. But they said that. So Willie O'Keefe tells this very like point by point, clear as day, never changes his testimony type of thing. This is what happened. They said Perry Russo. Here are the ways that Perry Russo was different. First off, Perry Russo wasn't gay and wasn't a prostitute and didn't know Clay Shaw.
Oh, damn. That just takes all the juice out of the movie.
I was like, that is a huge thing. But he came forward after and I might be getting this part a little mixed up, but it'll make it a better story here in a second. But I think he was basing it off of this thing that was already considered a hoax. And he came forward like years later. It wasn't like an immediate thing that he kind of came forward, and he wasn't interviewed in jail. And I also don't think that he ever met Garrison face to face, but he said that he created this big story about, Clay Shaw and all this other stuff. And, somebody took it and said, okay, well, Perry Russo's this, guy, not adding to that. Perry Russo was a known con man and was, I think, in prison for like armed robbery or some shit too. So that was also most of what the story was based on. That was a big part of it.
Well, no, there is the thing in the movie where he says Costner and, one of his assistants or whatever, they're talking about they're talking about like a prostitute or something that was saying, that had some shit to say about it. And he has that line where, I always found it hard to understand why just because somebody's a prostitute, it affects their eyesight or something like that. I mean, he, in a sense, I kind of see where you're going, because they set that up in the movie like he's this guy who's, Costner's character, Garrison's this guy who it's like, just because they're criminals doesn't mean they can't see straight, or that they're lying anyway.
Well, that is one of those ones that that could be the fault also of Oliver Stone needing to make him so different. So in a lot of the stuff I read about it, they also blamed Oliver Stone for that too. Is that Oliver Stone could not have any of the witnesses to this conspiracy have where you doubted them. They didn't have to be good people, but you had to believe they were always consistent with what they were saying. And, witnesses are rarely like that anyway. And then on top of it, too, somebody like Barry Bruce, that was all, I forget what the fuck was wrong with him, but the reason that he was the last guy you would ever believe. He could have been telling everything, could have been telling the truth, but you wouldn't trust it because you're like, yeah, this guy's a junkie or whatever it was. Is this thing, and so. But the movie, Oliver Stone couldn't take that risk with it. He needed to have a guy. So I'll make him a prostitute, but I'll make a prostitute that never tells a lie. That was kind of his, that was his way of looking at it. So when I was saying that what did you guys want to talk about anymore? Because I am going to go ahead and jump right into the big thing.
Go into the big thing.
Do it.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's just get into it now. So the biggest thing to this movie, and I did not know this up until probably 10 years ago. So I lived with this movie for a long time, not knowing this. But once I found this out, I'm like, well, is any of that movie fucking true? I was like, we're going to talk about Donald Sutherland. And we've got to talk about his character's called X. So that in itself is just a big affectation, but God, where do I even start with this too? So first off, I made a mistake, Vito, when I was telling you that he is not based on anybody real, completely made up. I am wrong about that. He is a real person. He's based on a real person, not just somebody pulled out of the sky. The man he is based on is Air Force Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty.
Oh, yeah.
And so this guy he was a technical advisor on JFK. He was actually the reason that a lot of people started looking into JFK, was that he was the technical advisor. He had quoted a 1967 study by this group, Iron Mountain, and all of the things you see in there was all stuff that he was talking, everything that the whole Donald Sutherland.
So the whole monologue of Donald Sutherland is taken from another group.
A 1967 study. Now, what's fun, I guess this is the thing that made me laugh out loud, was it ended up being in 1972. Somebody pointed out that was all a hoax. It was written by a political satirist, that Leonard something, that was making fun of think tanks.
Oh my God, that's
it was
funny.
Not even a real thing. It was all not a real thing. And so this guy.
So let me get this straight. So the Donald Sutherland monologue was not only taken from this whatever report was written, but that was actually a satire that was written by somebody.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was it's like the people that think an Onion article is real.
Yeah. Like I'm feeling like an idiot.
Like I said, I lived most of my life believing this is true. I mean, it's
the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it is. And that's when I was like, because when I started like getting very disenchanted because the stuff wasn't true, was when I kind of went back and I just started reading some of the reviews, because I was curious of what people said about. Nobody really, I mean, I'm sure some reviews do, but most of the reviews don't fact check. They look at it purely as, is this engaging to watch? And to a person this is the fastest 3 hours you're ever going to see.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's that pacing. That story, Donald Sutherland, summed up most conspiracy theory in 15 minutes that existed in the world in a compelling way that wasn't boring. And honestly, was like really fast paced. That's an achievement. So, whether it was true or not. Because that's the other thing too. Garrison never met that guy. They did not have a sit down in the park. This is based solely off of what the guy wrote.
Oh, wow. So
God.
it's not even okay. So was that in Garrison's book? Because Garrison wrote a book they based it off of. So did Garrison say he met this guy?
That I didn't. I'd have to read back into it, because I'd
love to know how full of shit Garrison's book is. That'd be kind of funny.
Well, one thing I will share with you too, and I did not know this, or it sounded familiar enough that I might have heard this tidbit years ago, and then I just found it out again. But I believe it's Michael Rooker's character.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
In real life, was an FBI plant.
Get the fuck.
Now, you know what's interesting when you say that is that in the movie, he's the character that ends up being, sort of like sort of turning against them. You know, he gets like he by say the FBI or the authorities. So it's kind of there's that's interesting because it could even be that there's a like that is legit. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, that's legit because even in the movie that might be full of shit, there is a little, you know, speck of truth there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and one other thing too, just since we're talking about some of the guys in the office and they have the one guy up there with the gun and aiming it and seeing if you can get that many shots off in that time frame. One thing I heard about Oswald, like for months on end leading up to the assassination, which again might lend some credence that there was more going on. What's he planning? Which we'll get into my last bomb. I shared with you, V, too, but I'm going to share.
Oh yeah, we'll get into the actual gun down in a bit.
Yeah, so he would sit there on his porch and do nothing but that bolt action, you know, that they do.
Like who did that? Who did that?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, God,
he
what
did
a crazy
that. He was
psycho.
On his porch. Yeah, imagine if you're sitting there, you see like your fucked up neighbor playing with his rifle on the porch. You know what I'm saying?
See, in today's, if it was today, like, you know, they'd be reported, or it'd be on the news, like, well, I saw him fucking playing on the porch with the gun. You know?
Or he'd be posting it on Instagram and like hashtagging, "Come get my guns, motherfucker."
So he was, but he had been practicing that. So for somebody that was, I mean, anybody in the military or like a sniper, that's something they're practice over and over again. It seems very dull to anybody else, but for them, they want to be as fast and as efficient as possible. So he knew how to load and reload and cock the gun and do it a lot faster than we do. And we'll also we'll get into the guy that was able to copy it. And it was the impression in the movie was it can't be done. And it had already been done. There was a guy who was able to replicate it. So with it, he was, if you go back to like just any military drill, whatever your job is, that's all you do. You learn how to just pick something up and put it where it needs to be and set it. And then somebody else comes in and does their thing. They do it over and over and over again. That's what he was doing with practicing his gun on the porch, because for him, he kind of thought he was this anti-fascist fighter. That was what he considered himself.
Oh God!
And so he needed to be. He's the original.
He's the original. That's right.
That would really do something to the brand. but he really did. He thought he was, and so he kind of thought, well, I have to be ready. But he had his list. He had a kill list. He's like, this is who I'm going to take care of. People that he saw as, trying to destroy communism and everything else. And so one of the names on his list was Edwin Walker. For him, he thought, well, this guy, Edwin, do you guys know who Edwin Walker is?
Only after we talked about him, you and I, but
not me. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah. He was basically just this right wing, super right wing, kind of like, I think he's in the right of Trump. He's right wing. And he thought, Kennedy was a communist, which, as you can see, nothing's changed. He called Kennedy a communist, and that
die.
He needed to be removed if necessary by force. And they said that about Texas. Apparently, the reason he's there is that there were so many parts of Texas, even the Dallas Morning News, that would write things that would imply that, well, if you kill the president, it's not the worst thing in the world. That's not what they would say, but that's what they implied with it too. So, Edwin Walker thrived in this environment. He went out, he ran for vice president on some lunatic's ticket, and I don't have the energy to get up. But one fun fact about Edwin Walker, he was also a closet case, and in 1978, he was arrested in a bathroom trying to solicit a policeman.
Awesome. I love him.
But anyway, so he was doing his taxes at the dinner table, at his kitchen table. Lee Harvey Oswald had practiced the run to Edwin Walker's house. He had told Marina that he was taking classes at the library. And so in Russian, I think. And so she's like, oh, okay. But he would leave, and he would for weeks, he was just doing the path he was going to take, where he was going to hide the gun, and where he was going to escape to. He did it over and over and over again to make sure he could do it. So he took a shot. It was from a couple 100 yards away, but it's also through fences. He's doing it from an industrial park. There's shit all the way in front of him, but he's going to take a shot because he can see him out the window. So he does take the shot, and this guy missed Walker by a hair, and it only missed him because of it pinged off something, and it just sent it flying just a hair. He would have killed Edwin Walker at his table. And
when did this happen?
this was it's between 2 to 6 months. I forget what it is.
Before Kennedy?
Before Kennedy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like a page 5 newspaper article. It wasn't big news, so nobody really paid any attention to it. And I think the only way they were able to later on find out, I think like during Warren Commissions, I think when they discovered it, was that the bullet matched. I learned this too, and maybe gun people know this. So Lee Harvey Oswald shot Full Metal Jackets.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know, I always thought Full Metal Jackets were the shit that could really fuck you up, but those were actually put in by the Geneva Convention because they would cut right through somebody, but it would limit the amount of damage internally, and it would still create a wound. So that's why, yeah. So there's not as much. So that would explain the first shot at Kennedy, that you see that reach up to the grab to the throat. And if you really watch the video, you can see John Connolly is hit at almost the exact same time that Kennedy gets hit. So it's a very quick thing, but you have to look at it as a close up. But he reached up and grabbed his throat. Now, the reason he didn't go down was he wore a back brace because Kennedy had Addison's disease. I didn't have time to look up what it was, but he was on borrowed time. Like he knew he was going to die young.
And didn't he also, like, speaking of his back, I mean, he hurt himself. I mean, he got injured in the war.
Yeah.
Too. Like, and he was like, he did speedball. He was like a coke heroin dude. Seriously. Like he was like a
he knew how to
he's a partier.
He partied with Sinatra, yeah.
Sinatra, speedballs, Maryland. He
put a lot into those 43 years. He put a lot into those 43.
God damn, he was 43. Think about that. I'm going to be 43 in a few months. I haven't done shit.
No one's even trying to assassinate you, right?
God, I got to get back on speedball.
So anyway, but the funny thing is, if he didn't have that brace on, he would have just fallen into Jackie's lap. They said when he got hit in the throat, though, he was immediately a paraplegic. Like he was never going to have any movement from up there. And they said that whole move to his throat wasn't him grabbing his throat and rocking back and forth. That's actually the physical reaction that you just naturally, your body spasms.
Oh,
and
it's
it goes up to your throat.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's really kind of crazy that for like 45 years felt like, oh, well, he just got shot through the throat and that's why he's grabbed. That is why, well, maybe it was through his head now that I think about it. Like, however it came through. No, that one came through the throat because that's the one that severed his vertebrae. And that's the one that hit Connolly at the same time. Now, this is going to be my other bombshell for this.
Oh, God.
So I'm just going to need to drop some. So don't worry, I'm not going to bring up aliens or some shit, dude. This is a real thing. In Lee Harvey Oswald's diary, John F. Kennedy may or may not have even been in there. But one name that was in there and had a dagger with blood dripping next to it was John Connolly, Governor John Connolly, who switched to the Republican Party when Nixon became president. He got to become Secretary of State or Defense.
Yeah.
I forget one of the, I think it was Secretary of State.
Of pussy.
And he was going to run, I forget who the hell was it. He was going to run at one point too, because he was considered like the next big Republican star. He was going to be the next Nixon, but I think physically he couldn't do it. So, But there was a reason that Oswald was going for him. And if you want to say he missed a little bit, the president would have been sitting right there. Oh, yeah. Another thing from the movie. Before I forget, I just brought up the motorcade.
Yeah.
It said in the movie how the path was changed.
Yeah.
The route was never changed. It had been set for months.
Fuck.
They never changed the route. That was always the plan. They said Dealey Plaza used to be the place, or I think it may even still. I mean, that's just because of where it was at. It was like a natural thoroughfare. So, let's have people come out.
I will say it is. I mean, because I was telling Vito, I've been on the episode.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you were.
I've been, and I could easily see. I mean, obviously Dallas is way bigger now, but because it's like but it's like freeways meeting, and then there's the overpass, but there's a lot of shit going on there, like walking stuff. I mean, there's restaurants and there's. So I can see why that was such it's like a hot spot. And I can see it back then really being a hot spot. Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently, so a lot of this came from another podcast I listened to too. They said that one thing people do not appreciate is if you jump out of your car, stop traffic because you want to take a picture next to the spot that Kennedy got killed, which apparently you could do. So, but that's so fucking crazy to me. Oh, another one. out of see now stuff is starting to come to me that from the movie as well. Gene Hall was brought up in the movie. I remember this being
Gene Hall.
So, well, we're going to get to Gene in a second. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about because I remember when I first saw it, I was like, she said this. How the fuck is not everybody?
Oh, the chick.
Look, yeah, that says she saw the guy with the gun on the grassy knoll. Everybody's like, there's Gene Hall. She said, I saw a person with it. And now you have to question her credibility. And from what people say, she's credible. And I think she thinks she's telling the truth. Because if there is one thing that is more untrustworthy at a crime scene, it is an eyewitness. They are just notorious for it. So the one thing with Jean, apparently the day of the shooting, the day she was interviewed by the Warren Commission, she was on the day of the shooting, she was interviewed by TV. She never mentioned a person on the grassy knoll. It was never brought up. So it was brought up when she realized she was going to get to be on. She got
TV.
Interviewed by somebody. She knew she was going to get some notoriety.
Right.
And, it was like a microcosm for Lee Harvey Oswald. She saw a chance for her to have a name. So she wanted to come out and she said she saw somebody else shoot Kennedy on the side of the head because I think, oh God, I don't even know. Vít, do you know when the Zapruder film first was shown?
Yeah, I believe it was a little bit after.
It was it was in the 70s, like because
it was Geraldo Rivera.
It was Geraldo Rivera,
yeah.
exactly. I believe it was 71. I don't know. I just saw it in a documentary, but I have to tell you real quick, Joe, on a side note, I just saw a recent documentary about, and they showed the Geraldo Rivera clip when he first played that to the country. So it was on TV. But you know who was there the whole time from Oswald? He was a Dallas reporter. He covered all the Oswald stuff. He was there when Oswald got shot by Jack Ruby. Everything was Bill Mercer, the announcer on World Class Wrestling.
Oh yes!
Oh no shit!
Oh fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. He covered all of that. He was a Dallas reporter before he got into wrestling.
Oh, I got to say too, the reporters and the cops too. I mean, if they're the reason Ruby was able to kind of skate through, but
we'll get to Ruby later because I want to talk. I want you to really tell Vince right now. Let's get into some of the juice here on this. If we'll keep going back.
I'm going to start with one thing that's a good transition from what we were talking about with Dealey Plaza, because a big thing that people brought up was the smell of gunpowder. Apparently in Texas, and maybe it's in other parts of the country too, but apparently it's very prevalent in Texas, is that you make your own bullets. You get gunpowder, you fill it up, and people will say they can smell gunpowder. If you smell it, you know it right away. And people smell gunpowder near the book depository, and people smell gunpowder near Kennedy. That was a thing. And that was really what kicked off a lot of this too, is like, well, we got these witnesses who did say they did smell something down here. And I think when the reason I brought the Zapruder film is the reason when that came out and everybody got to see the wound on the side of the head. Even people who don't know anything about guns will sit there and look at that and say, well, that wasn't made by the same thing. Because if you explode a head, you'll explode a neck. It's not like just specific to that. So I thought that was when I all of a sudden was like, oh, that's really interesting. So the reason, now this is something was put forward by Howard Donahue. I mentioned to you, the man, it was CBS in 1969, had 3 sharpshooters come and they redid it. And they said, could you pull it off? Everybody had 3 shots at it. And first guy couldn't do it. Second guy couldn't do it. Howard Donahue shows up, and on his 3rd try, he does it. And he was also a ballistics expert from Baltimore, Maryland. He's right from up the road.
And I loved his show. Donahue was a great show. Oh, we're talking about a different. Okay.
And he was married to Meryl Top, whatever her name.
Oh yeah, she was sexy.
So he was a ballistics expert. So he would go to trials, like if they needed somebody to say what kind of gun did this, and he was a guy that they would go. He was a go-to, almost like Sir Weck was for forensics. And he said, he goes, that is not the same caliber gun. He goes, somebody else shot him in the side of the head. And so the first thing he studied, which, with this whole thing is, because I love conspiracy theory, and I'm the first person that will always just look for the thing that confirms what I believe. So,
Right. Yeah.
So it's easy to kind of get caught up with things. But the one thing people could have done that he did was, well, if somebody is shot from behind, what does their head do? And the whole back and to the left actually is what happens if you're shot from behind. That's what your head would do. It wouldn't just perch forward. It would have this herky-jerky motion to it, and it would go back. And it was something that he goes, you could have done 2 seconds and they could have found that info, that was something that a head did. So what he did then is he took how his body fell, and he's like, okay, well, what direction did that bullet come from? And the bullet came from the car that was right behind them that was carrying Secret Service men. So that is the start of the story.
Yeah, start breaking that down.
Okay, so that's the start of the story
we're at the start of this, because I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, man, it's gonna. So I'll keep it as brief as I can. But with the story is that the night before they did, everything happened. The night before the assassination, the Secret Service was out partying. I mean, they were going hard out because apparently Kennedy, they traveled so much that year. The Secret Service is like, fuck this, like all the guys who were usually
it's Dallas, it's the 60s, it's Kennedy, who is just a coos hound anyway. So he's like, they probably run trains on chicks when Jackie O was never around, and like, so they are like party Secret Service. Like Trump's Secret Service is like them. They're just
it was like Obama's. Obama had the guys that got caught down in Colombia with
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So it's like,
all right, let's get back on Dallas the night before the killing.
Yeah, get back on track with it. Okay, so we'll back. So they went out partying the night before. They're out till, they were, honestly, they said they either got an hour of sleep or they just rolled right into the event. And now, mind you, if they're not hungover, they are. Think how drunk you've ever been in your life. That is like how drunk they are at this moment. But I thought it was kind of impressive that they could still keep their composure, because if I was that loaded, I would have been a fucking mess. These guys at least, but they did say, and this was the faithful thing, is that they were like, well, we aren't going to be able to stand up on a sideboard. And if we need to use the gun, we're not going to be able to shoot anybody. So they sent kind of the rookies to do the job. And one of the guys, and I forget his name, and I feel weird using it because it's like,
it's Hickey. Is Hickey the last name?
Hickey. Yeah, that is it. Yeah. So Hickey was like kind of the driver. He's the guy who cleans the car, because the Secret Service, you start out, you do all the shit jobs. And that day they were like, Hickey, you're going to be one of the guys. So he was riding in the car behind them, and he was riding on the dashboard. And they said he was super nervous that day. It was the first time he was ever given that kind of detail, which I would be scared too. And so he said so the first shot goes off. I think it misses, it ricochets, but then the second one hits. He said as soon as he heard the first one, they immediately reached down for their guns. And he is standing on the seat, which isn't a stable surface anyway. Okay. He's just standing on a seat that has no roof. And the driver hits the brakes, and he hits the brakes. So when he does that, Hickey I've never shot an AR-15. It was the first day they were using the AR-15. And I think it had a hair trigger on it, I guess. And so he just tapped the trigger, and that bullet, that is what an AR-15 does. It just blew the motherfucker's head off. It was just like this crushing thing. And so with that, the AR-15, which again, this isn't something they say in the movie, it's certainly not a coincidence. They took it out of rotation the day that happened. That was the last time an AR-15 was ever used. If you were to ask them, they were trying to protect the president, whatever their reasoning for wanting to get rid of it. But that's telling, that they did, that they did get rid of it. So he denied it for years. Obviously, Howard Donahue wrote this book, and in the book, he laid all this out. It was, kind of like a point per point thing too, where it wasn't like just something like, I think this person did this thing. He only used, this is what this bullet looks like. This is the trajectory. Here's the only person that could have pulled the trigger. And that's how, that's how they, he was like, that's how I came up with this guy. He didn't just use him as a scapegoat. He just was like, this is who I believe did it. Now, that's where I guess I'm a little bit weird about it, because I'm like, oh my God, this creates so many more things too. So the reason that JFK's brain's missing.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, no,
so you
I
knew that.
even
Okay,
said that to
that's
Vito. I was like, well, wait a minute.
That's right.
Like his brain is missing. And that's part of my belief in the conspiracy is that like, oh, obviously they took the brain.
Yeah, well, you're right. And that is one of the things of the conspiracy. It is 100% correct. The question was always who took it. So a law in Texas is if a murder happens in Texas, doesn't matter where in the world you are from, the autopsy is done in Texas. That is where it gets done. Where they do the trial, I think they are whatever, but they do the autopsy. So they said there was a scene in the hospital where the doctors had at one end of the table. The Secret Service had the other end of the table. They're like,
Yeah,
he's
now
our president.
this-
We came
Yeah,
in there
I've
with
heard
him.
this,
We're
yeah.
leaving with him. And they got Kennedy just sloshing back and forth on there too.
Oh, God, that's
But
disgusting.
so they take him and the brain goes missing. And, most people thought, I remember there used to be people thought RFK had it. And I'm just going to go ahead.
Well, no, we know what happened to it. Igor took it and took it back to Victor von Frankenstein.
That's what I was going to say to Vito. I was like, I don't care. If somebody goes, hey, I have Vito's brain. If you want to keep that in your house, I would be like, fine, man, no. Like that was, so they thought RFK took it. I'm like, why would he? That made no sense to me.
Yeah.
But then they were like, the Secret Service knew we have to clean up and we have to shut our mouths and no one has to know anything because they're the only ones that knew the truth of that. And so they get control of his body. His brain goes missing when it gets to the hospital. There is still some weirdness in all of this too. I know I'm kind of laying it out like, anybody that thinks it's a conspiracy is full of shit. There's still enough weirdness with it.
Let me ask real quick,
Yeah.
Joe.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
I've
first
been
off,
monologuing. Go ahead.
a couple things. First off, if anybody is listening and is like thinking you're far out with it, Harvey Levin from TMZ, not as detailed as what you're saying, but kind of shares your belief in the Hickey theory. There's a video on YouTube if people want to find it where when he was in college, he was really into JFK, and I think he interviewed the guy who wrote that book, the Donahue, and he talks about the AR-15, and that's probably what happened. And it does make sense, but
yeah,
let's talk about the CIA, because that's what everyone always brings up. The CIA did it. The CIA covered it up. So let's talk about the CIA and what their involvement is or is not.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, this starts where it gets always very, I'm always like, this is one of the supervillains like of all time. Alan Dulles. The Dulles brothers in general. I just started reading Devil's Chessboard. It already starts off. They both collaborated with Nazis during the war.
Damn.
Alan was trying to actually forge a peace with Himmler, who was the head of the SS. He was trying, and he knew about the Holocaust a couple of years before the American public did, because he was getting these reports of the Holocaust because he had Germans that, like, there were Germans that were like all of a sudden showing up going, what the fuck is going on? And they would see these things, so they would get pictures and they would smuggle them. They'd risk their lives smuggling them to Alan Dulles. And Alan Dulles would be like, oh, this is crazy. Oh my God. But this guy these people would also give, reports like, hey, there's, communist uptick in the area too, where they're now becoming a bigger presence where you're at. That would be all Alan Dulles would report back to Roosevelt. Alan Dulles thought that we should have been allies with Germany in World War II, and we should have taken on Stalin instead. That should have been that. He said that should have been the alliance. He was trying to, because Alan Dulles' view on things, the Dulles brothers were aristocrats, which is what most of the spy agencies were then. It was just a bunch of rich people who didn't want to join the military, so they joined the spy agencies, and they got to pretend they were James Bond. Some of them were James Bond, obviously. That's where Ian Fleming gets all that. But
yeah,
for the most part, Alan Dulles was this really wealthy guy that was able to play spy. He was getting used by the Germans, and he is also responsible for Operation Paperclip.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to go into with him, but he was also
Paperclip is whenever we brought over the scientists from the
Werner von Braun.
That
and
I've
all
heard.
those
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
and it wasn't, everybody points to Werner von Braun, who was bad, but I mean, he brought guys who like were, you know, doing human experimentation on twins, really sadistic shit. Anyway, but not to, yeah, I don't wanna get
Crazy.
carried away. But so Alan Dulles was also the guy that thought we should overthrow Castro. Kennedy's view on this was, we can't let America be seen as overthrowing governments. That's not who we are. We're not going to do that. So Alan Dulles was like, okay, yeah, fuck you. So we're going to do this anyway. So he goes, once we do it, he's going to have no choice but to help us. And that was their view on it. I mean, they did it in Iran. They were going to do it in Iran, or they already did in Iran. They were going to do it in Chile. They did it in Guatemala. I mean, it's so fucked up now too. All these places, they had done this too. So they were like, we're going to do it in Cuba. What the fuck? Don't worry. He's going to back us up. But as soon as Kennedy brought planes there were people that reported it to the UN saying the US just went to war with Cuba. And at that point, Kennedy's like, turn them around. We're not doing this shit. So all those guys that invaded Cuba, some of them were CIA, some of them were ex-Cuban, or were Cubans that were in exile, and they showed up and they just massacred them. And then for some of it, you know, Castro made it a point of like, I beat back the Americans. That was kind of where all that came from. So Alan Dulles, when that all happened, they say this a million times, I think, in JFK, how Kennedy said he was going to, you know, smash the CIA into a, like, whatever, splinter into a million smithereens or something. And he fired Alan Dulles. And that was like, it wasn't probably to the extent, but it was kind of like if he would have fired J. Edgar Hoover. It was huge when he did that, when he fired Alan Dulles for it too. That was really Kennedy showing some balls, because he just got humiliated. He took all the responsibility for it too. He didn't throw anybody, including Dulles, under the bus. He took the responsibility for it, but he told Dulles, he goes, you're fucking out of here. I can't trust you. And Dulles never accepted because he didn't need money. He just felt like he should have still been the guy in charge of those. So he would still have people come to his house.
Yeah, once you're in power like that, you know, I mean, you get addicted to the feeling, you know, to the this and the that, you know, the prestige.
That was it. That was everything, because Dulles just wanted to be famous, which is so crazy to think, because like he was so open. But they said like he wasn't really all that smart a guy. You know, he was just bold as shit. You know, he just thought he could do anything. So he was doing all this crazy shit, and he never really thought like, I get to do what I want. And so when Kennedy stopped him, now you get into, I thought JFK implicated him enough, but if you want somebody who can get whatever he needs done without those people ever knowing he was the one who ordered it, he was like Kaiser Soze. He could have had that if he wanted. Yeah. And then he gets put on the Warren Commission. He got put on the Warren Commission. And not only was he put on the Warren Commission, guess who was in charge of Dallas? I mean, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
At the same time, too. You have this guy that, you know, that's all I always say, you know, for all the stuff that shows like, okay, it was Oswald was the guy who did it. You know, this is how he did it. He could do it. And all those things. Alan Dulles they never really explain, well, how did he get there? They do, but here's this wiggity shit that's in the background. And most people's response is, well, maybe they let him do it. They do track people. They know who they are, especially if somebody has defected, spent a couple years away, and then comes back into the country. They're going to keep an eye on him. And then he goes down to Mexico.
So I'm sorry, we're talking about the CIA. They know who
the
Oswald
CIA
is.
know
They're
about
watching
Lee Harvey
Oswald.
I mean,
Okay.
They do know about So one of the last things that Oswald did, like, again, he's such a fucking loser. He decides that he's going to go to Mexico, go to the Soviet Union's embassy in Mexico, and offer himself up as a spy for the communists. You know, it's either the FBI or CIA. It's one of the, like, they know he's there. They see him going and doing these things. They just assume what actually was correct is that the Soviet Union did not take him seriously. They just kind of say, okay. You know, like, you know, they kind of just humor him. And, you know, he leaves, he's dejected, but a lot of people will point to that, though, is why were they following him? Because that is in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald's in Dallas when that happens. And it's, again, not long before he kills the president. And the CIA knew about this guy and nothing happened. But I would say that is nothing did happen. He didn't do anything. He went down there and made an ass out of himself, yes, but there was nothing that guy could pick him up for, and also, too, if he would have brought that Lee Harvey Oswald in, they would have just made fun of him. They're like, why did you bring this stooge in? Did you guys ever see him when he was interviewed by the news?
Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like before he got caught. When he was talking about the communism.
Yeah.
Wasn't he on a show like it was some kind of weird like show, and he was with like one of those Cuban like whatevers, like radicals or whatever.
Yeah, he was making. Yeah, Lee was working on his image. He was out there though. That was when, like I said, and then him being in the same building as Guy Bannister, but like he was
love Guy Bannister.
Fucking what's it, Ed Asner?
Fucking hell, man,
awesome.
He is one of my favorites in that. Now, to sum it up just the shooting part down. So we're saying here in this theory is that Lee Harvey Oswald did act alone.
Yes.
Okay.
In this, I will say that.
But he still didn't technically kill the president.
But he's still responsible for it.
He did the shooting. He did that by himself. But the question is, and the question that I think no one will ever really have an answer to is, how many people knew about him and let it go? Right. That's the question too. And that's why I always leave the door open on conspiracy theory. I'm like,
so why Arlen Specter, the magic bullet theory?
Oh, okay. So I'll start with the magic bullet theory, because that's another one of those ones that when it got debunked, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess not. But they said if you really do see how they were sitting in that car and that seat that Connolly was in, not only was it not directly in front of him, it was down, and he was a little bit to Kennedy's left. And so when that bullet came through Kennedy, the direct line would have been him hitting Connolly was a once in a lifetime thing. It hit him in the wrist, but it came through his chest. I mean, he did hit Connolly, and that was the thing. So it wasn't a magic bullet. It was a legitimate one shot, because if you watch very close in slow motion, which as I say that out loud, I need a life really bad. But if you do watch it in slow motion, you will see that Connolly is hit just about the same time. And that was when Connolly turned around and said, "It's a turkey shoot. They're going to kill us all." And before the shooting, you guys probably know this. Did you know that Connolly's wife turned around to the Kennedys and say, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you now"? And she said that
that's
shit.
funny as shit.
And that motherfucker, and that's when the bullet came through, and I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Oh, that's fucking insane.
There could be a comedic film made out of this whole thing. Totally
that's
true.
That is an absolutely true story. And the other, going into other cool conspiracies that, and I will say Stone did get into, well, how much did LBJ know?
Right.
And I think LBJ is another one of those guys that he knew how dangerous it was for Kennedy to be there, but he wasn't necessarily a part of him getting killed. I think it was one of those things of, if he gets killed, fuck it, I'm president now too. Because Lyndon Johnson never thought Kennedy deserved the presidency. Lyndon Johnson hated the Kennedys. And, because he thought he made his bones in the Senate and that he should have been president. And they had a really contentious primary. And the only reason Kennedy picked him is because he needed Texas.
Yeah.
And Johnson knew it. And so they went back, and it wasn't as if Johnson was any happier with it. And he knew what the fucking stakes were there too. He knew some. So I guess what I'm getting to, and one thing that I don't think Stone included in the movie is the picture of Johnson right after he takes his oath. The oath.
Oh yeah, that picture.
Sad-looking oath.
Oh yeah, where he's there, and then Jackie O is there, and she's
the bloody gown.
Watch like a second later. Watch like a 2-second later picture of the one guy giving a big smile, and they're both giving a big thumbs up to each other, and I'm like, man, I would have taken this and just run with it for years if I would have saw this picture a long time ago too, because it looked. I mean, for everything that just happened, and they said also Lyndon Johnson. I mean, the moment he was named president, everybody's calling him congratulations, Mr. President. He's like, thank you very much. It was like nothing. The only reason Jackie O was even standing there is he wanted to make sure that him becoming president, the Kennedys were for it. He made her stand there. She did not want to be there. He didn't want to, and he made her stand there during the whole thing. And so with Lyndon Johnson,
now, and one of the
when you get
documentaries that I saw real fast, I wanted to say, one of the documentaries I saw, they tried to say that it was Jackie O being defiant, saying, no, let me be there and let the world see how bloody I am. And they built like a narrative there behind that. I didn't know if it was true or not.
I've heard that, but the reality is like Birdie, the Lady Bird, she had to talk her down because she was hiding in the plane. She did not want to be.
See, that's what I would imagine. It's like you just saw your husband's brains blown out all over you. You don't give a fuck what's going on. You don't want to be.
She did though. She apparently in the hospital though. They were like one of the nurses that come up and said, hey, let me get you something to wear. And she goes, no, I want she wanted every picture. She goes, I want people from around the world to see what they did to him because she was covered in his brain.
See, I thought that's not where I thought you were going to say, like, just she wanted one last look at that cock. She was, can I just go in and just take a look under the sheet one more time because he's dead.
That's the other thing too. I heard about Kennedy, and guys, I'm not here to destroy sacred cows. I don't know the size of the manhood, whatever it might have been, but to a woman, they were like, just said, I mean, he was a dead leg. I mean, he showed up, he pumped you a couple times.
Yeah, he was pathetic.
He went ahead and did his thing.
He was pathetic.
He thought he was a great lover because he said he never knew a woman not to do that. And so he just assumed that's how it went.
Because he's just a rich boy,
How did we get on that? But it was
because this is what you have to. You get into the thing.
Well, let me go somewhere real fast then with this. Okay, so we get the assassination, regardless of how it happened. If that's the way it happened, it doesn't matter. Kennedy's dead. They end up arresting Oswald, and we'll just say the CIA knows about it, but they're letting him go, let him do his thing. Where's Jack Ruby fit in? Is Jack Ruby because now that goes somewhere else if you get into the whole chaos?
I was just I'm right there with you.
Another thing. Go ahead, Vince. You finish your thought too.
I was agreeing with Vito. It's like that's the thing to me. That's actually the thing I should have said earlier. That's the other thing is he's connected to chaos, and he was being given like he was doing those treatments of LSD. I mean, like there's a big part of that where he's being controlled by the government.
Well, we talked about too, Joe, and in the episode was like, I don't know, maybe it's just us, the romantics in us, but we were saying that it would be kind of we thought it was like that Agatha Christie thing where it was like everybody's guilty. And I thought when it came to Jack Ruby, I do think there was some type of Jolly West, CIA stuff with maybe Ruby because he went fucking crazy in jail. But the actual assassination, I always thought the mob did put him up to it. He was a connected guy, and that seemed like it made sense, like on paper. I don't know though.
Oh man. Now I will tell you, Jack Ruby, there should be book after book about him. He should have movies about him. He is so interesting that the fact that he is always kind of put together as this like hitman who was always in the service of the mob and going out and doing the show. So we brought up chaos. Now this is what I will say is and I don't know if he's another one of these people too that I just don't know that I can close the door that something weird is there. But Jack Ruby, if you were to go by what just about everybody who knew him and interact with him that day, and really that entire couple of days, they said that when it happened, they weren't surprised. And he was kind of there by, I don't know if you can call it luck, but he was just there by happenstance too. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He just happened to be there in the area. And in a moment decided he was going to shoot Oswald. Now, you say that out loud, you're like, that sounds like a bullshit story. And I thought the same thing. I'm like, that doesn't sound real. But Jack Rubenstein, which is what his real name is,
Mhm.
Oh no.
He grew up in Chicago, and they said he was, Jack Rubin, he beat the fuck out of everybody. I mean, you
Yeah.
need somebody's ass kicked. You went to him, and he just had a hair trigger. He go from 1 second being the nicest guy in the world to the next second, you just see him just beating somebody to death with a club. I mean, he was a crazy asshole. And he got to Dallas. I forget why he ended up in Dallas, but he owned multiple clubs in Dallas. All of them went under because he was a terrible businessman. But he catered to cops. So when they came into the place, they ate and drank for free. You know, they got dancers and everything too. All the cops knew Ruby. He was kind of one of those guys, always handing out his card at the place. So all the cops knew him, and he was always at the police station bullshitting, trying to get a crowd built up, people coming to his place. And he was also, Vito, goes back to you saying, why does he care? Jack Rubenstein was a diehard Kennedy man. Kennedy man. Because Kennedy was good to the Jews. And he said that was his president because he was good to the Jews. And he said that. And so for him, when he's on, remember how grandma had the picture of Kennedy in the house?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the day. Those were the days when people kept pictures of him in the house. Like he was so popular in a lot of ways.
He was a minority president. No doubt about that. Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. And with Rubenstein, with Ruby, you know, he had his place, and you know,
So let me ask you then. Okay,
he closed it down the day of the assassination. Spent the first day at the police station watching everything go down because the police let him come back because they knew him.
He was there the day before too. I was watching a documentary, and they think they saw footage of him standing in the background when they first brought Oswald. Then
they said that he was like, he shouldn't have been there. The cops let him there because they knew him, but they said Jack Ruby was there all the time though. They go, Jack Ruby being at the police station, the reason they let him back there is he was just a fixture at the police station. He was just always there. They said that actually other crooks never talked business in front of Jack Ruby because he was also giving the cops information. You know, like he was one of those guys. Like they knew they couldn't trust him for that, and so that was a big thing too. Like when he was getting accused of it, people were like, Ruby didn't fucking do shit because Ruby was just like he was a guy that you couldn't trust him, so no one would put him in a conspiracy. That was the thought of Ruby.
So let me ask you though, then
why he was there.
Let me
tell you why he was there though. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry. You're going to say why he was there, but but my thing was, okay, if he did kill him, that's okay. He was there. He shot him. He was nuts for Kennedy. But how did he go crazy in prison? Like, remember, he kind of like lost his mind. Yeah. And is there any truth behind that? How Jolly West supposedly came, interviewed him for 8 hours, and then after that, he was never the same again. According to Chaos, this is a Tom O'Neill book, Chaos. He says Jolly West, who was the head of the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic, and he was the COINTELPRO guy. So he was really big on the dipping people in LSD and making them go nuts. Supposedly, he came in to interview Jack Ruby. He was in a room with him by themselves for 8 hours. He left the room, said Jack Ruby's kind of nuts or whatever. And ever since that their meeting, Jack Ruby until he died was a complete basket case. Is there any truth to that? Have you heard that?
Yes. That is one of those things that I have no idea if there's any truth to it. I don't know. I have no idea. There might be, but then there also is the other side of it that Jack Ruby tried killing himself in prison. When any of that happened, I don't know, but he did try killing him. But you know how he tried killing himself? By running headfirst into a cement wall over and over.
Oh, fuck.
Which might cause some brain damage too with it. But
that sounds like LSD.
But he died of cancer. He died of cancer in prison.
Yes.
Right before he's supposed to go to trial too. Again, there is so much room there for conspiracy, but the word, he is like one of these people that he doesn't intentionally become an agent of chaos, but he is because he's bipolar, he's violent, and he's also very social. This is a guy that is like a bull in a china shop. I mean, in a lot of ways too. So he's in Dallas the day that they're going to be transferring Oswald. They are transferring Oswald. They wanted to make sure that Dallas police were as open with the media as possible. They're like, we already have a bad reputation. If we then pull we're doing this really private investigation, people will never trust us again. So they were giving a lot of access to reporters. And Ruby is downtown. The only reason he is downtown is because one of his strippers had called him, said she need him to loan $35. Would he Western Union her the money? And he apparently motherfucked her. He was on the phone for a while. And then he went down there. And when he got finished at Western Union, he looked up at the time. He's like, oh, they're going to be transferring him. And as he's walking, and so Vito, I want you to put in your head somebody from our past. There's so many of them that you can think of, but just somebody as they're walking, you can tell they're getting madder and madder and madder, and they're starting to blow a fucking fuse. I mean, there's so many people back home like this. Yeah. And he rolls in there just like, I'm going to shoot this motherfucker. And his reasoning, I always thought was very, that it just seemed to me like he was just throwing a reason out. But he said he didn't want Jackie O to go through the trial. That was why. As he walked in there, that sounded like to me like a big bunch of horse shit.
Yeah.
But what I thought was funny is that he thought he was going to be considered a hero. He thought he was walking out of prison that night.
That I could I could buy that. I could buy that.
Sure, I can too.
Yeah, but at the same time, he shot somebody. That's going to prison.
No, sure, but he's still a hero. It's like killing Bin Laden. Like you got to go stand for trial or something.
Actually, a lot of people. So this was what I thought was interesting because I was kind of like you guys. I'm like, well, I mean, I don't think everybody thought that was a bad thing, but they said most of the country wanted to hear what he had to fucking say. Lee Harvey Oswald. Because I mean, pretty sure, like Ruby killing him meant none of that was ever getting solved.
Yeah.
That guaranteed that was going to be a case that was never going to be solved because of Ruby. And that was like, he was kind of like considered this, bumbling idiot that kind of, they just like thought, I mean, how many times you've been, in life, you had this one person that decided to stir up some shit someplace because, and they create some self-righteous reason for doing it. That's
yeah.
I know a few of those motherfuckers.
Yeah. So for him, and then what was his quote when they arrested him was like, I just wanted people to see that a Jew had guts. Like when he was in World War II, of course, he thrived on killing Nazis. Like anyway, yeah. Ruby was a lunatic. Ruby wasn't some cold-blooded killer. Like I would have to say that, if you're hiring somebody to kill, you want somebody who's efficient, gets their shit done, and doesn't cause a big scene. They said Ruby always caused the scene, but maybe that's what they needed. They need somebody to distract everybody from what was going on. Who knows?
That's crazy. I met this actually about a year ago. I met this old lady out here, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm from Dallas." And then we started talking, and it ends up coming out. She was like, "Yeah, when I was younger, I was a little bit of a go-go dancer." She worked for Jack Ruby, and she was telling me Jack Ruby stories. So I was like, "This is great." And she's like, "Yeah, he was just a mobster and all that kind of stuff." But yeah, same thing as you said. When she was young, so she was like like an older teenager when it happened. Mm-hmm. But she said when it did happen, like all the girls at the club, she like what you said, no one was shocked.
No one was shocked.
I thought that was funny.
Even when he got arrested, apparently he was like, "I'm Jack Ruby, you know me." Like they were going to be like, "Oh, it's just Jack."
That's great. Well, let's go. Before we wrap up, I want to go back though. What can we take from Oliver Stone's movie that is fact? Is there fucking anything that we can go back and like, well, we have that?
Here's what I would say though, and I think it's the wrong way of looking at that. Wrong way of looking at it. I think the best way of watching that movie is appreciating it as a movie. That like if you watch it as a movie like recently was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. If you guys watched that, that was a really good spy movie. Yeah. Really twisty and everything too. If you watch JFK, knowing a lot of the stuff and they did say that, they go, all the theories in the movie were real theories. He didn't put anything in there that was just he made up because he thought it sounded good.
Right.
Everything in there at one point had been a theory. He just threw everything in it. And they said and I thought, I'd watch it like that. You enjoy it then a lot more.
No, that's probably the right way of doing it. But I'm just still mad that we didn't have a Roman orgy and Kevin Bacon's character is not real. And Vince has got to be pissed off now.
Forever, I will always think that there's always going to be this weird Roman orgy. And there's always going to be, at least John Candy is real. At least Dean, whatever the fuck his name is real. And he smoked cigarettes and ate like a horse.
Was he real? I thought he was a conglomeration like him.
No, he was real.
He was a real guy. He was
real. And he actually, of all of them, he's the one, like John Candy looked like him the most. You know, he had that short haircut with those
Yeah.
black shades, and he was big and fat. You know,
Well, wasn't Candy? Candy was disappointed too that wasn't like a lot of it got cut. He got left on a cutting room floor. He was really looking at that as
what
big.
did
Yeah,
Vito?
you're right.
What did you say about that? He was
Well, he
nervous?
was nervous, and he really was sweating like that, and Oliver Stone let it in because it was one of his first movies with like real, serious actors and everything. But so a lot of that sweat was real, and Stone kept it in.
John Candy, that's the thing though. It's still a good movie. Every actor in there, like you said, except fucking Costner.
Yeah,
really
I'm not,
everybody's
I'm not big on
invested in it.
Garrison either, and this made it even worse for me.
I would say Garrison, I didn't really realize what a fucking moron he was. They said the reason people didn't respect Garrison was what we just talked about. That is really, I mean, he didn't hide his whole thing about thinking it was a homosexual cabal. That's what I'm gonna lay it out for you like this.
There's a comedic movie. There is a riotous movie buried in here where it's just a homosexual cabal that is trying to kill the president. And then you got Jack Ruby, who like nobody likes, and he's I mean, you could have a lot of fun with these characters, but I gotta say that after all of this, I think it's one of those, like, you separate the art from the truth, or the art from I still love the movie, but maybe I'm just like, you know what? It was Oswald in the suppository with a gun and some CIA guy, and Jack Ruby was just a psychopath who was doing it for his country. God damn, we've been fooled this whole fucking time.
Yeah, the conspiracies always make it a lot better, and the truth is always boring. And it's like the simple explanation, which makes all sense. Everything that was said makes complete sense. And I remember hearing about this Hickey guy before, and I was like, well, shit, that makes sense why it was a cover up, because you can't admit that we fucked up this bad. And let's close out, Joe. Let's talk about why there was kind of a cover up. You talked about Russia being the superpower at the time.
Yeah, they said they go, you have to put yourself in the Secret Service's shoes. If it's the height of the Cold War, what does it look like if Russia's able to say, you think this is the most powerful country on earth? The people that are hired to protect the president just killed him. And we've been laughing about it making a hell of a comedy, maybe 100 years from now when people aren't so sensitive about it, but it really would in a lot of ways. It was almost like, the Keystone Cops, with what happened. So for them to come out and admit that's what happened would have looked just terrible on the country. So because at the end, I'm sure they told this guy, in the end, if Lee Harvey Oswald doesn't pull the trigger in the depository, none of this happens. So you didn't do anything wrong.
In theory, I get it. That kind of make you feel a little bit better. You didn't mean to kill the president.
I got to throw this in. Like, every time you guys mention this Hickey guy, all I keep thinking is Clint Eastwood and In the Line of Fire. Like, I keep thinking he's the same. It's like, oh, that's who they based it on.
I keep thinking William Hickey, so the actor. So I'm thinking like him going, okay, Kennedy.
It's like from the Burbs.
The guy who saved Jackie O. You know why she was climbing on the back trunk? She was in shock. She was collecting his brains off the trunk. And so the Secret Service guy knew they were about to take off. They said if they would have gunned it early, she was dead, because she would have been right on top of that trunk. He said he was the one that pushed her into the seat, and he grabbed the back of the trunk, and because it was him and his partner got assigned to her. And this was like the Nick Cage movie, about Tess, Shirley MacLaine,
Tess.
But like they didn't really want that gig. They're like, to get that gig, you're out of the president's loop. So they took that, but they were there with her up and through the funeral too. And the one guy, it really kind of destroyed his life. It seemed that way anyway. He couldn't talk about it till like a year ago. The whole thing.
Damn, that's crazy. Well, that's the story of JFK then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to ruin the movie for you guys. No, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna enjoy the movie more.
I'm gonna go watch Platoon.
It was a day that changed our lives.
I saw a flash of light in the bushes, and that last shot.
A new documentary marking the 50th anniversary of JFK's assassination hopes to revitalize America's long-dormant obsession with conspiracies surrounding the death of one of its most iconic leaders. JFK, the Smoking Gun, claims that JFK was killed not by the bullets of Lee Harvey Oswald, but that the fatal bullet instead came from the Secret Service-issued AR-15 of a clumsy government agent. Riding behind Kennedy's car in the motorcade on that fateful November day, inexperienced agent George Hickey allegedly stumbled as he attempted to respond to Lee Harvey Oswald's first shot. Authors say this instance of friendly fire inflicted the mortal wound that shattered a portion of the president's skull. The documentary, which is set to premiere on cable channel Reels on November 3rd, is largely based on the Bonner Menninger's 1992 book Mortal Error, The Shot That Killed JFK.